Good evening, workshoppers. Coming live to you here on a Tuesday. I know it's weird, but as I mentioned on the previous episode, my work schedule is going to be changing up a couple of the recording dates. But on this episode, we do have a couple of things to go through and run down. We've been having some back-to-back episodes with the Diablo IV dev blog that we had last week. I hope that you've had a chance to go through and check out. But on this episode, we're going to go through and be talking about a little bit of things from the Diablo II Resurrected. We've got some things to talk about with the Diablo Immortal Alpha, may it rest. We also, of course, have some Diablo III stuff to talk about, as is going to be the main topic for the episode. And we even have some things that I missed from the Diablo 4 news coverage from last week. That I think should go through and be included. But without saying anything else, let's go ahead and get episode 213, season 24 on deck started. But yeah, as you can kind of guess from the show title, we're going to be talking about Diablo 3, season 24, the new patch and all of that. But before we get into that, there are, of course, a couple of little, house cleaning things I want to go through and mention. As is, at E3, we got the release date for Diablo II Resurrected, being September 23rd, and it was just like, oh, September? Man, that's so far away. That's like end of the year. Why am I going to wait so long for that title? And then now it's like, oh shit, the beta is next month. We have no idea when in August it's going to be, but the beta is next month. It is just under 3 months away. You could say it's a little more than 2 months away. It's like, oh, that's getting exciting, right? Right? Man. We're going to be going through and heading back, to the rogue encampment sooner than I expected. Though I still gotta wait until September to play either the Necromancer or the Assassin. First character that I play in the new game, of course, is going to be a Necromancer. But then I'll probably end up rolling like a Trap Assassin afterwards. Or actually, probably one of the things I'll do is I will like level up a Necromancer because that's my favorite. Maybe I'll go and do something, stereotypical like a Sorceress or a Paladin just to go through and farm so I can get some nice runes. Get my Rift keyword, and then make a Rift Kicker, which is probably the most fun I ever had playing Diablo 2, was the Rift Kicker Assassin, and I want to rebuild one of them and play that. But, your stat allocations are all, like, straight up garbage if you don't have, like, that specific thing. And, it's like not exactly what you would call a amazing build. Can it clear hell? Yeah, it's got crushing blows and a 6-frame kick, right? Right? That can kill anything that's not physical immune. But, anyways, just wanted to point out, that beta is coming way sooner than I was expecting. I don't know if it's sooner than you were expecting or realized, but it's here. It's knocking at the door. And speaking of knocking at the door, oh my gosh, it is another second Thursday of the month coming up this week. And I've mentioned this before, but on the Blizzard Gear store, the second Thursday of every month, they unlock like the Blizzard Vault, and they do some like really cool kick-ass things, for their various franchises. Some of them have been like an amazing Arthas sculpture, and despite me like having like all of the Diablo things like sitting in the background there, $1,000 that's a hefty price. I guess it's not even like $1,000, it's like $1,100. That's a high price. It looks cool, it looks awesome, don't get me wrong, but that starts putting it into a different category. And so like if they did like a 2-foot tall statue of like Diablo or Malthael, it's like, sure, I'd want one, but I'd have to think about dropping that much money, and so in addition to like that, they've also done, they've re-released some of like the older like polystone statues that they've done. Also, as well as like cool concept art frames and things. It's not just that; it's a whole big like collage of materials of either past products that they used to make or just like some cool like little side stuff, from the history of the franchise. Like a lot of like Arthas sketches and such for World of Warcraft, some Overwatch concept art and such. I do look forward, but at the same time dread when it finally comes time for it to be Diablo's turn to be unleashed on the vault. And yeah, the Thursdays, they scare me. Or at least I should say they scare my wallet. But that's I still have a few days to go through and cringe in terror at the hat. We'll see how it comes. But we also in the meantime, since the actually it was like on the recording of like the previous episode was the last day of the Diablo Immortal Alpha. It ended on June 30th. And that was unfortunately one of those ones that kind of got like caught in between like the news cycles between like the last full episode and then the last episode, which was focused entirely just on the Diablo 4 developer feedback. But the Diablo Immortal Alpha has finally come to an end. That was a good, solid chunk, like 2 months of testing that we got out of that with the game. And I hope that the developers were able to get everything that they needed, out of everything that the players were going through. I know it got to be a bit of a ghost town on the content creator server, but the Australian server had a far more active player base. It had far more people on the player base, and so that I'm sure is where they had a lot of like the data collection and such. And there were, even though we had people like Echo Hack and Brax and such that were absolutely blasting on the content creator server, the NA server, they still had some people that were also like hardcore blasting over on the Australian server too. And this was primarily like kind of like the pseudo PvP. There wasn't much PvP. There was like PvP elements to it, but it's just like PvP that is like disguising just more PvE content, whether it be the kind of like the vault runs, which are pseudo PvP, like if you're good then you're not gonna trigger the vault guardians, or what began happening that once the shadows got like really good buffs, they would bait the immortals into the vaults because the immortals wouldn't stand a chance, and so they just kind of like killed everybody and then ran and cleared the rest of the vault because they didn't have to worry about the immortals coming in, or just like the the shadow contracts and the immortal daily goals. That's just go and do some stuff and you'll get some bonus rewards out of it. Maybe I feel as if it was missing a little bit something, but then again, it was also because on the NA server we didn't really get to experience battlegrounds. We didn't really get to do the non-content specific PvP. It was really the only time that there was like, and even in the going and doing the Rite of Exiles, that was to go through and like purge the immortals and put the shadows up there. There were never enough shadow players on to actually like win. Like, even if all the shadows that participated kicked the immortals' asses, which really didn't happen, they didn't have enough people there to actually win the encounter. And so we didn't get like that full experience that they had on the Australian server with it going through and like getting flipped. And also on the NA server, they had to relegate the battlegrounds to like specific times. And I have no idea if there was actually any type of matchmaking, because it was just difficult trying to get 16 people in total to sign up for the battlegrounds to even have it done, let alone it having the capability of actually matching people based on like Paragon level or gear ranks and such. And I wonder if that's something that they will at least gotten enough testing data from the Australian server that's something that they can do, because that was just like the biggest thing early on. Like when you were like Paragon like 10 versus someone that's Paragon 30, it didn't feel like that big of a power gap. And I imagine it was probably, like gear level 5 to like gear level 10, wasn't all that big. But then, like, towards halfway through the alpha, it was like Paragon 40 versus Paragon 100. And gear level 9 versus gear level 16. And then it was just like, okay, I don't stand a chance, like, at all. I can pop my immunity, get on my horse, stun you into a corner, and hope that I drop you enough life to have the advantage that once, like, the stun is off, that I can kill you before you just turn and stare at me and I fall over. So something that kind of like mitigates the that type of scenarios. Not something that like mitigates the advantages of having better gear and higher level, because what's the point of having better gear and a higher level if you can't just beat lower geared people? But at least like matchmaking of some sort to go through and make it so that way it's a bit more even in the matching. That would be nice. We at least know that we have one more round of testing for Immortal. We have the 55 to 60 content, the in-game zone, which we can kind of guess is going to be hell, and then whatever type of actual in-game PvE systems that they're going to introduce into the game in the Necromancer. Come on, we gotta have the Necromancer, which I gotta be talking about later on in the episode and how I don't like it. I don't like it, but that will come in just a little bit. But the meat and potatoes of this episode, of course, is going to be talking about Diablo III, Season 23. As we know, has now been announced that it will be ending on July 18th. So that is a Sunday. That's about a week and a half from now. So if there's anything that you have left to do in the season, now is the time. I was at least able to go through and finish up everything that I needed to do in the season, over the weekend, and it really it wasn't that bad. Especially, like, this season has some of the easiest conquests that there are to do, and so it's just going through, hopping on anyone, anything. I had to get like the learning how to play the new Rathma set and getting that situated and kind of like geared out, and I'm learning how to play it and getting all the pieces together, and anything that involves like a high cooldown skill that requires like really statted out gear where like you need cooldown and attack speed on like every piece for it to like really flow and play well just feels clunky, because like your abilities don't like mesh well, and there's like a lot of dead time where you're just like running from mobs because you only have Army of the Dead to kill anything, and you're just waiting for your minions to attack and like get it off of cooldown, because you don't have perfect gear or well-rolled stats, or you don't have the supplementary legendary gem like the Gogok or whatever to give you the higher cooldown, or even just like I was working on Guardian when I finally got the pattern for the flawless royal diamond to even get like the reduced cooldown, even though I hadn't been using that build, because as I'm going through and trying to put the pieces together and get it up and running, I like got the masks set completed, and so I just like threw that together, and then instantly it just like jumped from like having issues with greater Rift 60 to like just going like straight to 80 without any problems. Unoptimized gear, didn't even have a socket on my weapon or anything. It was just like, let's roll. And it's that is Diablo 3. There's not a lot of parity between all of the sets. The Rathma set can go through and clear up to the 100s and such. It's nowhere near as powerful as like the mask or like a poison scythe build or such, but it's one that it feels really like clunky to like really do effectively, at least, or it feels clunky to to start with. I guess I'm trying to look for the term that I want to say, but it feels very clunky to at least like just get going, because you start off with just so much dead time, and there's no like real way of mitigating it besides just getting better pieces. You just have to constantly go through and get those things in order. It's not terrible. It definitely could go through and get things done. But because I mean, it's also funny because the Burning Masks is also one of those ones which has a really wonky start, because until you find the Haunted Visions, like it doesn't work well. Like, you can go through it and you complete, when that comes up in like the Hadrig's Gift, you can complete your set, but it's like unplayable, completely unplayable, until you get the Haunted Visions in order to make it work. And it's just like that wonky jankiness of the build that makes it kind of difficult in order to start a season with. So maybe the next time that like Rathmas or the Masks comes up in the rotation, I might just start Demon Hunter, because like Demon Hunters don't really have a bad set to start with, because they have all of the tools baked into it, to at least give you a decent start, no matter what you do. Like even like Marauders, you can at least push, up to the point that you can unlock primals relatively easily, without having like that negative play experience that some of those early Necromancer sets are like building themselves into, because that is the nice thing, that development of Diablo 3 is focused a lot on the end game and like what does this class play like at solo Greater Rift 130, or solo Greater Rift 130 plus, but at the same time, I don't think that some considerations are being given to how it feels to like start a season with them, or to level it up for the first time. Take a brand new player that, say, goes from building a Necromancer set with Pestilence, like the Pestilence set, where you have the tools. It might not feel all that great, but you can get, like the Flesh Golem to give you a whole bunch of corpses to like kill some things, to give you more corpses and go and kill some stuff, or you can just do bolting to kill some stuff. And so when you're playing in those lower levels, like Greater Rift 30, like 30 through 50, as you're just getting the set together, learning how to play and everyone, it can, you're learning the build and you're not having like too bad of a time. And because you can keep the difficulty, at a level where you just kind of like one-shot stuff and have fun. But then as you complete the set, it becomes more and more effective. Like you get an Ingeom for going through and doing, like speeding out your frozen lands and such. As opposed to like with Rathmas, you literally, it doesn't matter. You can one-shot everything on Greater Rift 80, with the Army of the Dead. If you don't have the attack speed and the cooldown reduction, you're just sitting there for like 10-15 seconds waiting for it to come off of cooldown. And then you use it and kill some enemies, and then you're waiting for it to come off of cooldown. It's not a very... It doesn't feel like you're playing it right, because you're just running around avoiding mobs, for 10-15 seconds. And, so... maybe it's like the one thing that as they go through and do some rebalancing that they can add something on there to just make it a little bit easier for kind of like that lower level play. Because even something simple like putting into like the Rathma set, like make revives do 5,000% increased damage, because that will help early new players go through and push like their Greater Rift 50s or Greater Rift 60s and 70s, so they're not having that bad of an experience. So they're seeing the mobs die as their little uncontrollable minions run around and kill things. They're still seeing things die. They feel as if it's doing well. But then once you actually have all the modifiers, you get the bracers and the bracers, the helm and such, all these things to modify the damage on Army of the Dead, combined with like the 6,000% or the 10,000% on Rathma. I forget. I'm confusing it with Burning Mask now. I've been talking about that one too much. But it's like the scaling for Army of the Dead comes from the supplementary pieces multiplied by the set bonus, and you just bake in something simple like a revive damage bonus or a skeleton or a golem damage bonus into the set. So that way those things can kill at these very low Greater Rift levels. Like no one cares about how good your class is at Greater Rift 50, right? But it won't have those multiplicative stacking bonuses that will then take you up to Greater Rift 100. So it starts off fine, but then you really have to focus in on those pieces in order to push higher in. And so it gives it more of a curve with your level. And so that way, you have all the pieces together. You've got your big nuke with Army of the Dead, but your revive still can kill things for you. You're not having that bad playtime where you've got a lot of dead space. I mean, you still have a lot of dead space because revives are uninteractive, but you don't feel bad because you see the enemies dying. And then once you get up to like Greater Rift 100, okay, yeah, it's like, or even probably like Greater Rift 80, but well before 100, that you have to have the supplementary pieces, and then you realize the entire build is all around Army of the Dead. Like you can literally just throw on 5,000, 10,000% extra damage to revives onto the set without it breaking anything, because there's nothing else that increases revive damage. So at Greater Rift 100, Greater Rift 130, it doesn't mean anything. Only Army of the Dead will be dealing damage at that point. Just my thoughts, some of my feedback on my experiences with Rathma, and then from Burning Masks, from when that was the Hadrig's gift from a couple seasons ago. And then I also continue to hold out hope that we might get like a revamp of Tragol's. That's a set that needs some love. Tragol's and Inarius are unfortunately kind of sitting way back there. I think maybe Inarius has like a D tier build, like over on Max Roll or something like that. That is just like you can do something, with it. I think Tragol's literally just has like the old like Rift Guardian killer like Lancer build, if anybody remembers that, which is obviously it's been years since that was a top build, and it hasn't received like a single buff since then. So maybe as they go through and they do some of these tweaks and such, we can see some of these underused sets, because I mean Ina's got a revival with upcoming season 24, and that one despite some like server stability issues, it seemed to be people having fun with it. But to get back on track, we're talking about the end of season 23, which again is coming up on July 18th. That means that we have a window to predict when season 24 itself will launch. Now, traditionally, we have gotten, I can't even really say traditionally, but of like the last couple of seasons, barring season 23, we were given a 2-week grace period, and they said that they were going to commit to that with having a 2-week grace period in between seasons. And so that would mean if we had the season ending on July 18th, that under that scheme, season 24 would drop on Friday, July 30th, with a potential patch either on the 20th or the 27th. They've kind of alternated between which, whether they drop it like the Tuesday right after the season end or the Tuesday before. I'm sure that there's a lot of technical issues and things like that on like the deployment and the server side. That is the reasoning for whether they do it, with the 2 weeks or just the 1 week. But as I just mentioned, With Season 23, we did only get that one single week that was in between Season 22 and Season 23, though, as we would later come to realize, it was because they had the Diablo II Resurrected Alpha. They had the Diablo II Immortal Alpha. They had all of these things in Diablo-focused testing that was coming right on the heels of the season launch, and that might have had something to do with it. We're wanting to go through and like push that date up a little bit because they had things that were set and rolling, and it literally was going to be, hey, if they gave us the 2-week grace period, we would be playing the season 23 start alongside the Diablo 2 technical alpha, and where a lot of people's focus is going to be. It's going to be the limited time shiny thing that they only get to play for a week. It's going to be Diablo 2 Resurrected, because that one is like limited, and then you've kind of like lost that early momentum like going into the season, because you're now, anybody that didn't get into it is a week ahead of you, 2 weeks ahead of you. We do have another round of Diablo 2 Resurrected testing coming up in August, so that might be, a clause for them to want to go through and push it up to July 23rd, but then that creates another issue where it has happened a few times in the past, but Path of Exile is having their new expansion, their new league start on July 23rd. They're having the actual like patch reveal July 15th, and their new league starting on July 23rd. So again, it's like one of those ones where it's like, well, do they just drop it the same day anyways and say, screw it, we got D2 coming up, or do they, push it back, to not coincide with the Path of Exile launch, to give us our 2-week window as, we want or what we care about, and then just, the Diablo 2 Resurrected testing, be damned if it coincides with the Diablo 3 season. There's time frames and there's pressure on both sides of that coin, and I am not envious of the lead producer's shoes on this one, that's having to go through and make these calls and set these timetables and put out these dates. And because they've announced the season end date, but they haven't given us the season 24 start date, makes me think that it's something that's still in heavy consideration, and there's a lot of conversations going on in the background on this one as to what they want to go through and do. Ideally, you'd have Path of Exile launch on the 23rd. There's a lot of overlap in the community between people that play Path of Exile and Diablo. But a lot of people will go through and kind of like they achieve their Path of Exile goals, not as quickly as Diablo 3, but a lot of times they'll go through and they'll get the majority of like the playscape that they wanted to go through and accomplish, within a couple of weeks. And so it's not too much, if they stop like a week into progression to go through and hit the season 24 timetable, or the season 24 launch, if it were to drop on the 30th. So like you have July 23rd Path of Exile, July 30th Diablo 3, and I can be super optimistic and say like August 6th Diablo 2 Resurrected, right? Wouldn't that be a great like 3 weeks to be an ARPG fan? That'd be just 3 weeks of straight brand, I guess, new content, because Diablo 2 Resurrected like really isn't new. It's fresh graphics, which doesn't sound all that great, but then once you get your hands on it, it's like absolutely amazing. But yeah, I would give a fair hope that it would be July 30th. So if you force me down and ask me to predict it based on nothing more than my own personal preference, I want it to be July 30th, which means it's probably going to end up being July 23rd at that rate, right? Because I'm 9 balls always wrong. But at least we know. It pretty much is like guaranteed. It's either going to be July 30th or July 23rd. I don't see them extending it out to a 3-week delay in between seasons and going to August 6th when we got the D2R alpha or beta coming up right in August. So it's going to be it would be sooner rather than later. And then of course, once we have that season start date, I'm sure that they'll probably also announce when the patch itself will go live. But if nothing else, once we get that season start date, we'll also have the patch notes, and we'll be able to see what has changed, from the PTR cycle to live. As we've seen, with all of like the past seasons over the last couple of years, is we would have like 1 week of PTR. And then, previously it's like we'd get the 1 week PTR. Sometimes they would extend it by another week and implement some changes for us to go through and look at. But then they would, release the patch, and they had changes. They had further changes than that. And that's been the case, since they have committed over the last 2 seasons for this 2 week PTR, that we got 1 week of testing, implement some changes, a 2nd week of testing, and then they implemented some other changes in the background right before the season launched. And I want to say that, going into season 23, there were some changes after the patch but before the season dropped. I can't for the life of me remember. It was, that time period was lost due to stress and anxiety because of all of the events that happened around the beginning of April for me. But yeah, I could go look that up, right? But there's, I'm sure that there's going to be some more changes. People are enjoying Ina's, but it had like some severe performance issues. Burning masks, especially I could see it with just getting those bracers, and you're off to the moon. With season 23, the set's getting nerfed going into season 24. It'll still be better than season 22, but just not as good as what you achieved last season, which is fine. That's fair. Of course, but then there's the ethereals, which are going to be crazy and going to be pushing like everything to the moon. I am sad that the soul render got nerfed so badly, though. The soul render was just like, that was stupid, like how overpowered that was gonna be. It's like at that point, it's like the grandma test. How high of a GR can my grandma get? You just put poison scythe build and the soul render on a necromancer and just watch her clear a 150 and be like, that's it. It's definitely far more subdued in power this time around. But it still could have been fun. I look forward to going through and messing around with them. I also look forward to going and leveling up a whole bunch of classes and farming for the ethereals on everyone to try and unlock those cosmetics, as well as unlock that feat of strength through the season. It gives me a bit more of a longer term goal than just unlocking Guardian. So I'll probably end up sticking with this one a bit more than what I usually do. So I'll get burnout just as the same as everybody else after a couple of weeks. Also, it's going to be dropping regardless of when the patch in the season itself drops. It's putting me in a very interesting predicament, and as I mentioned on the podcast a couple of times, and we talked about on the after shows if you watch those over on Twitch, is I've got a really big Age of Sigmar tournament coming up halfway through August, and so I'm sure I'm going to get the season 24 drop, and then the D2R alpha, or the D2R beta, I keep saying alpha when it's the beta, drop 1 week after the other, right before the tournament is, and it's going to eat up all of my painting and playtesting time as I go into that AOS tournament. I've got almost everything built now. Before the show, I was going through, I built the last of my 15 Blood Knights. I have 35 out of 40 Dire Wolves built. Like, it's all set. The only thing that I have left to build now is 6 more Dire Bats and Manfred. But the rest of the army, is all put together. So I got Volga, Radiker, the White King, 15 Blood Knights, which is forever, and almost 40 Dire Wolves built, and Spell Portal. I got all that put together. We're almost there. I actually have been trying to prime some of these models, but the weather hasn't been agreeable. I'll stop ranting now. I'll save this for another episode of how's your weeks in gaming, or it should be how's your weeks in painting, at the beginning of episodes, or maybe for the after show. We'll see. Because before I wrap up this episode, I did want to go through and talk about something that I had missed on the previous episode for the Diablo 4, information, and it was that they had done something differently this time. In that there was whatchamacallit, they did a interview with Polygon, that coincided and dropped at the same time as the developer blog, where they talked about some of the discussion points a little bit more, and they also had some exclusive art. In that exclusive art piece was, of course, we got to see. We looked at the layer, for the barbarian in the very like Conan-esque like dry steppes. We got to look at the sorceress and kind of like that hall cathedral type area with the stained glass window that had like all the schools of magic, for the sorceresses. But we didn't have that layer for the rogue, because here it is. This is the rogue picture that was like a Polygon exclusive. And to correct one mistake that I made in the last episode, and I thank you for your emails for going through and pointing it out, that I guess last episode it was all about like the artwork, and that's really hard to then talk about in an audio only format for the listeners that listen on iTunes, Stitchers, and such, and that makes up the vast majority of the user base for the show, and so forgive me, that was my failing. But on this piece of art, we get to see, a rogue showing off some of the customization options. Namely, it's a fully bald rogue, with some facial tattoos, wearing some of the very kind of like Persian, Middle Eastern armor type looking set, with lots of reds and golds, very beautiful. But they're like in like the thieves or the guild hideout from Westmarch, if you remember that tile set, from like Rifts and such. So it's like the sewers, and there's like a broken sewer grate, and there's just like the stagnant standing water and some like makeshift bridges and such in the background. But the thing that's most interesting to me is that all the way in the background is kind of like that entrance to the outside world. And we're just gonna go through and zoom in here. And it's a swamp. And while it's like, oh, cool, that's a swamp, that's Hawazar. Oh, that's Hawazar. As listeners of the show will know, one of my kind of like headcanon things was that, well, Hawazar makes for a really good place for the necromancers to be from. So maybe that gives a lot of credence to the necromancer being the unannounced 5th class hanging out there in Hawazar, because all the other classes have like their really strong thematic tie-in to their zone. Damn it. I hate to admit, but I think that this is definitely tacking in a direction that kind of like travels away from the necromancer being one of the classes in Diablo 5. And that makes me sad. I want my necromancer. I want my necro. Though, obviously, they're going to expand out more zones, more places, more classes in Diablo 4. That's their goal, but I would want to play a necro from day one. And, well, it's starting to look less likely. Yeah, definitely starting to look less likely in that one. But then, what is the last class? We're gonna have to think on that one. Definitely gonna have to think on that one. Gonna scour the sacred texts and everything. Though, obviously, we really have no idea what it is. And we will have little to no clue what it could be until they go through and drop it on us. I would hope that we get something brand new, never before seen, just brand new class created from scratch. That would be great. I would love it. Um, but in barring that, Necromancer. With that, it is a bit of a shorter episode this week. I unfortunately got a lot of things to work on in between work and the aforementioned like Warhammer projects and some other stuff. I'm trying to get some things together because what was it? I'm taking a mini vacation as well coming up this weekend. So I hope no major news or leaks or anything goes through and gets dropped while I'm on my mini vacation. It's Neve's birthday, and so we're traveling out of town. And we're traveling from a cozy little beach town here in southern Florida to another cozy little beach town because it's different, right? Just to kind of like get away from things, for like a little 4-day weekend. So I'm looking forward to that. But it will bring the episode to a close. I thank you all for going through and joining me here this week. And like I said, next episode 214, is again not going to be on a Wednesday. So episode 214, you can put it on your calendar now. It's going to be recorded live July 20th instead of that's Tuesday instead of July 21st due to work-related stuff that I have going on both the 21st and the 22nd. But I hope that you enjoyed the show. If you liked what you saw, have any questions, comments, concerns, or feedback, feel free to drop me a line at Westmarch Workshop at blizzpro.com. A couple of listeners went through and emailed in, as well as Longshot went through and mentioned it in like live in the chat during the last episode, where the majority of people listen to the show, and so they don't get a lot from going and just listening to me sitting in silence saying, wow, look at that, as they let their MP3 play. And so again, I'm sorry, I will do better. But yeah, I record here live every other Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, saying that when I'm going to be hitting 2 episodes in a row that will be recording on a Tuesday, but hoping past that, Wednesdays will be free again and we'll be recording on Wednesdays. But follow the show over on Twitter at the WM Workshop to know when I'm going to be going live or when there's like last minute schedule changes or anything like that. And you can also always follow me on Twitter at 9ballgamer in order to go and get the latest tweets on when the show will go live, or just my inane ranting about games, whether they be Diablo, Warhammer, or as I did for most of the day, simping for Sylvanas with the new WoW raid that came out that I haven't even played. So with that, I bid you all a good night, and I will catch you all next time.